Hey everyone, welcome to Dissecting Dexter. I'm Gareth here in the home studio in Yorkshire, England, and I'm really excited to dig into the Original Sin finale with you. Firstly, apologies that the delay in getting this to you was longer than I promised. I did have a week's holiday after the finale, but then things got really busy at home and at work the week after, and I simply couldn't squeeze in the time. I just didn't have enough time to squeeze in rewatching the episode, never mind taking notes and prepping the podcast. Thanks for your patience. We're here now, although I do have some sad news to share. Long-term listeners will remember that years ago we had two kittens. We called them Dexter and Rita. Dexter was jet black and a killer, but he was soft as pudding. He'd go out in the garden and kill a bird and bring it into us, but then come in and sit on my lap, curl up, purring and be so friendly and gentle, a bit like our favourite serial killer actually. So those of you who've listened to some of those early podcasts will know that Dexter disappeared and we never saw him again, never found out what happened to him. It's still a mystery. But Rita stayed with us, and she was my little companion at home. She'd be there to greet me when I came in from work. She'd trot up to the door to say hello when I came in, closely followed by our dog. She would sit next to me if I was working from home. She would sit on my lap if we were watching TV. It's fair to say we had a bond. Anyway, she was going to be 15 this coming April, and last week took a turn. She got really sick, stopped eating, she'd lost loads of weight, she went really dopey and sleepy, but still had a little spark of her personality. She was still there, but she was clearly failing. We took her to the vets and found out that sadly she was in kidney failure. The prognosis was bad, and we had to make the tough decision to have her put to sleep. We're gutted, to be honest. We will miss her terribly. We have 3 other cats and still have our dog, but Rita was very special. It's not every day a podcast gets dedicated to a cat, but this one's for Rita. Okay, in other news, my eldest son has started watching Dexter, and I couldn't be more proud. We've binged the first 2 seasons in 2 weeks, and doing it so soon after Original Sin has actually been brilliant for me. All the stuff with Brian, so soon after seeing where he came from and what he went through as a kid and a teenager. You look at him in a new light. He's still a psycho, of course, but you can understand what drives him and really sympathise. What also jumps out to me is how jarring light and dark Dexter are. How goofy and awkward he is by day, and how fucking dark he is at the kill table. So dark. I think he was probably always like that throughout the original series. Now, Patrick Gibson did a really good job in Original Sin, but Michael, he just dials it up to 11 so effortlessly. And of course, as a person, Dexter in 1991 isn't the same person. He's not the same Dexter we see in season 1 of the original show. He's been through some stuff since Original Sin, not least losing his dad. He's killed a lot more folk. I'm loving watching them again. Season 2, though, I love the dope stuff, but Lila, wow. Jamie Murray did an excellent job of making Lila such a wonderful femme fatale, so seductive, but so, when she needed to be. Do you know what I mean by, like you wanted to reach into the TV and do the job for Dexter, save him the trouble. I'll check in again with you about this in another podcast and tell you where I'm at, but my son loves the show. He yelled out loud in the season 1 finale when the knife threatened to plunge into Deb, and he was shocked by the "I am your brother" reveal. It's great to see him reacting so viscerally to this. I can't imagine how he'll respond to the season 4 finale. Bless him. He'll need smelling salts and a stiff drink after that. So, we are here together again. If you want to support the show, you can always leave a review a 5-star rating. That would be nice on your podcast app of choice. It really helps. You could also give a thumbs up and a comment on the YouTube version if you're listening on there. If you want to go a step further, go the whole hog and support financially, because this podcast we do incur a cost or two, an expense or two in keeping the lights on. If you want to support financially, you can. We've got the Patreon page, patreon.com/Dissecting Dexter, if you want to support there for as little as £1 a month. And being a member of the Patreon page, you get access to our Patreon exclusive Shortcuts episodes. The latest one was more like half a full-length podcast. I went for about 20 minutes talking about, it was recorded before the finale. It was talking about Spencer and his motivation. We'd talked about it quite a bit on the podcast. The episode 9 podcast, you guys have sent in feedback about it and questioning the validity, is that the right word? How convinced we were, shall we say, by Spencer's apparent motive. Scott Reynolds responded. He listened to the podcast and he dropped me a line responding to that. And I read out his message in full and do a bit of research of my own and go very deeply into Spencer and the real life case of the Washington sniper that provided some inspiration for Spencer. So if you want to listen to that, join the Patreon page and you can get access to it and the few other Shortcuts episodes that we have on there. So thanks, as always, go out to my wonderful Patreon supporters. I love you all. And special thanks go out to my Premier supporters, Lara and Kelly, and my 2 newest Premier supporters. Thank you to Ryan and Jennifer, who's been a long-term supporter through the Patreon page and has recently upgraded to Premier supporter. Thank you ever so much, guys. Also, new supporter Scott, thank you very much. Thanks everybody who, all new and old supporters. Your support through the Patreon page genuinely helps, makes a massive difference, and I appreciate you all very, very much. All right, I've waffled enough. Let's get into this, shall we? The finale of Original Sin. As I record, it's March the 5th, 2025. No official word yet about renewal for Season 2, although production for Resurrection is still in full swing, so Dexter isn't going away anytime soon, which is great news. Here we go then. Original Sin, Season 1, Episode 10, Code Blues. Original air date, the 14th of February, 2025. Teleplay by Clyde Phillips and directed by Michael Lehman. This finale really puts the seal on the reframing of Brian. He's still a psycho, no doubt about that, but is there anyone left out there who doesn't have any sympathy for him? The opening scene of Brian and Dexter in the container, cutting to a wider view showing their mother's ruined body, her head staring lifelessly into space. It's horrible, but Brian's there, being the calm one, keeping his little brother calm, and how much effort must that have taken? He's there telling him the story of the 3 little pigs. Well, it's just heartbreaking. We've used that word a few times this season, haven't we? But it's so appropriate. No sign of darkness from them in this moment. Just the natural thing of one brother protecting another. It's sweet, but it is in the most grim, macabre, grotesque way imaginable. We hear Brian in voiceover, and we see he's in therapy with the late Dr. Petrie, talking about being separated from his brother. Something that was a cause of huge trauma for him and just layered on top of everything else that we've seen. But it doesn't stop there. He went from family to family and experienced abuse everywhere he went. The editing of the bit where he gets shut in the cupboard, that was nicely done. But how horrible how it drives home the memory of the container, being shut in, unable to escape, having no control. So the abuse continues, and none more so than at the hospital he finished up at. And as he goes along, he encounters abusers who end up as victims in the so-called NHI killings. Simple revenge, while at the same time honing his own skills as a killer. But at the hospital, that orderly stealing his meds, so he was going along for a long time unmedicated. The poor guy never stood a chance. Let down by people and the system at every turn. Medicated fully, medicated properly, he would have surely functioned better than he did, and maybe been able to engage better with therapies and treatments. Stark contrast to Dexter. Although we never see Dexter medicated or receiving therapy, but at least he had the stability of a loving, safe environment. Actually, I say safe, but honestly, does an adopted father grooming you to becoming a killer qualify as a safe environment? I'd say probably not. He was still experiencing a form of abuse, but under the guise of a loving father. I don't doubt Harry loved him, and Brian was missing the nurture of any loving, caring people, but if Dexter had received the proper therapy and appropriate medication, like Brian, would they have stood a better chance of not becoming killers? In my recent Season 1 rewatch, the flashbacks frequently show how Harry essentially he drummed into Dexter that he's a set-in-stone monster on an unavoidable path to having to kill people, establishing the code so that he could do it without being caught. Now, after Original Sin, we see why Harry might do something so arguably heinous. He wanted to protect this son at any cost, having already lost one through his own negligence. It's a double tragedy. And in Original Sin, we're seeing the early stages of a killer career that ended up with the events of Season 1 of the original show. I feel so much sympathy for him. Brian was let down by everyone. Dexter was let down by Harry, who had good but severely misguided intentions. Harry really is that grey area villain of the series. I hate to use the word villain, but in the context of this as a dramatic story, his actions pushed Dexter down the darker path. You might argue that he'd have always ended up a killer regardless of therapies or medication, and that's true. Maybe. But we'll never know for sure. This opening sequence in the finale does a great job of setting up where Brian's at now. He's been complying, it seems, because he's convinced himself he'll get to see Dexter at some point. But the doctor squashes that hope. When he threatens him with going back to hospital, I think the memory of the place triggers him and leads to the doctor's murder.
I have a brother. A real brother. We're blood brothers through birth and death. Watching Mom die? It's amazing that we survived that, isn't it?
You're listening to Dissecting Dexter.
You were there too?
Back in the present, we rejoin Dexter following Spencer. That calculated risk of letting him go. Perhaps Season 8 Dexter would have never done that, but young Dexter doesn't have the benefit of experience. However, his gamble pays off and they end up at the docks and an abandoned ship. I liked how Dexter tried to follow onto the ship, but Spencer was far enough ahead in the rabbit warren network of corridors and stairs and decks. He had to improvise to draw him out. So much for the element of surprise, and it nearly backfired, Nicky nearly drowning. The fight between Dex and Spencer is good. I like to see a more realistic brawl like this. Spencer gets the better of him in this round. He sets off the water in Nicky's cell. Again, I'm thinking, this is your son. What the hell are you doing? But as we see later on, and Scott Reynolds hinted at this when he messaged me after the last podcast, there's a little more to it. And as I say, I talked about this in detail on the Shortcuts podcast. But Scott messaged to tell me about where they got some inspiration from for Spencer, and that there's more to learn in the finale. Any Patreons listening who've not caught the latest Shortcuts, head to the Patreon page and have a listen. So for Spencer, obviously there were comments from listeners and me about his motive perhaps being a little thin. But a theme of the season has been how a single trauma can turn someone into a monster. I'm paraphrasing, and sort of using Dexter's vocabulary there, but dialing it back a little, basically how one event can make us do crazy things, and I can appreciate that. And I can see that here with Spencer. But we see later that Spencer doesn't even believe that Nicky really is his son. To him, he represents his wife's infidelity, as he sees it, her betrayal. So the young man playing Nicky does a really great job here. London Thatcher. Apparently he, in real life, is an experienced swimmer and was quite comfortable doing the underwater stuff, although I'm sure they still took good care of him. He does good, though, and so does Dexter. He's always had an affinity with children and never does anything to hurt them, quite the opposite, and here he does something completely selfless. I've criticised Dexter a lot since New Blood and in some of the rewatch podcasts over the years, how he has an agenda when he does something that might appear unselfish. He so often has his own reasons for doing something and will do things to manipulate people to achieve the outcome he wants. Here, he wanted to get Spencer, but he also wanted to make sure Nicky was okay. Prioritising saving Nicky was the truly selfless option, because allowing Spencer to get away puts himself and others at risk and could cause the house of cards to come tumbling down and bring Harry and Deb with it. But he throws all personal concerns aside, even his own personal safety, putting the life of Nicky first. It's a very unselfish human act, and I give him a massive amount of credit for this.
You're listening to Dissecting Dexter.
Deb's journey continues in this episode. The concept of family and how it can be represented by something other than blood. Through seeing Harry refer to Bobby as family and how he and the other police rally round, she sees a family of sorts, and we've seen how important family is to her and how her remaining family have frequently let her down. She wants and needs that support system, and she sees it here in the police department. She knows her dad's not in the best of health. She loves her brother, but knows that Dexter's not always able to be there for her. And she applies to join the police. It could give her that personal safety net of a kind that she needs. Harry reacts well, though. Not going to the college she originally wanted, but she has new aspirations now, and he's proud, which is really good. Bobby's her godfather, and she must think of him as kind of family. She sits with him at the hospital, and there's a nice little moment when Harry gives her a hug before he goes off to that murder scene. She has this smile on her face, appreciating the closeness. It really wouldn't take much effort to give her enough to make her happier. She's been neglected for so long, and it's not because Harry doesn't love her. As for the chainsaw murder, Harry lies to LaGuerta from the start, claiming not to recognise the victim's name, even though he remembers her. Obviously, he already knows who the killer is, and the mention of a chainsaw will bring back a lot of memories. At the scene, Harry can't help but see echoes of the container with body parts strewn all over. Dexter never sees this, and thinking back to the season 1 episode, Seeing Red, how that hotel room, awash with blood, unlocked that forgotten memory of his mother's murder, I wonder if, had he seen this on the rooftop, if that would have done it. Harry's on the lookout. He knows Brian likes to observe his crime scenes now, and he's looking out for Dexter. Harry spots him, and we get a great confrontation. At the hospital earlier, when Harry hugged Deb, I did wonder then if that was the last time they'd see each other. Just thinking about our theories that Brian would kill Harry, but no. However, we do get a fascinating conversation between them. Harry looks understandably nervous.
What did you do to him?
What are you talking about?
To Dexter? To make him forget his own brother?
He was so young, so traumatized, he blocked it all out.
How convenient. Is that why you threw me away? So you wouldn't have to tell your son the truth? That you fucked his mom, forced her to snitch, and sent her off to the cartel to get chainsawed to pieces in front of him? And what about the fact that you buried his only surviving sibling so deep in the system
Because then you'd have them all to yourself. I never meant to hurt you. But you couldn't be saved. Dexter could.
Dexter needs me.
You're right. He needs you. To let him go. You come back into his life, you're just going to bring all of that pain with you. All of that suffering. Is that what you want for your little brother? I saved Dexter from all of that. Gave him a good life, a chance to thrive. He never would have had that with you. Two things can be true at the same time. You can hate me for good reasons and still know that I am the best thing for Dexter.
You really think you're the hero?
Far from it.
So Harry acknowledges that he's not exactly excelled himself with how he's brought up Dexter. He's not pretending to be an angel in this. However, he's right in that he's given Dexter a better chance at having a life than if he'd just disappeared into the system with Brian. And he also makes a good point whether Dexter will benefit from knowing how his mother died. It's a question, isn't it? And we know from season 1 how he responds, but would he have been better off not knowing? I remember he got some relief from knowing he wasn't born like this, that it wasn't his fault, something happened to make him this way. And again, that links with with a major theme of this season. Throughout this conversation, I was still thinking Brian would overpower him and take him somewhere to OD him on his meds. I was nervous, but of course it didn't happen. Brian let Harry live, but he really did give him the opportunity to end it right there. Brian seemed willing to die, willing to let Harry shoot him. Harry had the gun pointed at his head, but the window quickly closed. We knew he wouldn't kill him, but until we saw him alive later, I really thought this might be it for Harry. Elsewhere, we find where Spencer ran off to. It's like he's got nothing left to lose and tries to kill his ex-wife. He's a man transformed. The gloves are off. He's enraged, shouting, "You lied that he was my son." And again, I wonder, how would he know for sure? I don't think there was any reliable paternity testing in 1991. From what I can tell, they could match blood types to have a vague idea, but no certainty. So is Spencer basing his doubt on circumstance, that the affair was happening when Nikki would have been conceived? He surely can't be certain either way, but it seems that small doubt is what he's basing this on. The verbal assault through the door is brief, though, as Dexter made an assumption where Spencer would go rather than just getting out of Miami. And so Dexter gets another bite of the cherry, this time with the knowledge that Nikki's safe. We don't see the conversation, but presumably he asked permission from Camilla, and he takes Spencer out on the boat, and he becomes the first victim to be dropped into the ocean. Spencer's a bit self-satisfied that he ruined his ex's life until Dexter puts him right. The three of them have a chance of a happy life, and Spencer's legacy is what's been ruined, and the wind is kind of taken out of his sails. I did chuckle when Spencer woke up and looked around and realised where he was, and he kind of sighs, "Oh, you again."
How many lives were you willing to destroy just because you couldn't handle your own emotion?
I am the goddamn Miami Metro homicide captain. You are a psychotic piece of shit. Stop it!
You don't deserve that badge. And you don't deserve to live.
Enough! Let's just get it over with.
Spencer hints at Dexter not knowing how Harry failed him. I wonder if he's referring to anything we're not already aware of. I don't think so. I suspect he just means that Harry's responsible for Laura's death because of his screw-up, getting spotted by the cartel and blowing her cover. We know that, but Dexter doesn't. There's a beautiful squelch when the blade comes down. I enjoyed Patrick Dempsey's performance, but I don't think Spencer will go down as one of Dexter's greatest adversaries. However, the main thrust of the season wasn't Spencer, so perhaps he didn't especially need to be. It's been It's been more about Dexter understanding who he is, learning about himself, learning how to function in society, learning how to kill, how to survive, honing his skills. It's been about Harry realising and accepting who Dexter is and how he contributed to that and how he can't prevent the need to kill, and bearing the enormous weight of it all, including the death of his actual son who died on his watch. And another theme that connects all four if you include Brian, and we've mentioned this already today, how a single trauma can change someone irrevocably. In Dexter's words, when he had Spencer on the table in the arcade, how a single incident can turn a good person into a monster. And this is part of what Scott Reynolds said in his message to me last week. So, yeah, Dexter, Brian, Spencer, and Harry. Okay, Harry isn't out there killing people. He's not the same as the others, but it led him down this path, led him to making darker choices, born out of his own trauma and anxiety. These things come together in a scene back at the Morgan house. Harry acknowledging how right Dexter was about Spencer. He realises how sharp Dexter's instinct is and that he should have trusted it more. Dexter confesses to killing Spencer and explains how he saved Nicky. I think Harry's almost proud of that fact. He looks impressed, but can't believe how he'd known Spencer all this time and he'd turned out like this.
I've known Spencer forever. He was my friend. Never in a million years could I ever have imagined he'd be capable of killing a child or torturing his own son. I saw in Spencer what I wanted to see, not who he actually was.
That person you once knew, who we all knew, he was good. Spencer wasn't born a monster. He became one. But me, I was born this way.
Yes. You were.
Well, that was powerful. Firstly, Harry says how he knew Spencer all that time and never knew he could be a killer. But he can't blame himself any more than Miami Metro in the original series could blame themselves for not seeing through Dexter, apart from Dokes. Dexter offers consolation that Spencer wasn't always like that. He was an inherently good man who was ruined by something that happened to him. Of course, we're all listening to this, shouting at the TV, Dexter, you're the same. You're the same, mate. You weren't born this way. Harry clearly has the same thought as we get flashes of young Dexter before the container, and then again in the container. He too was not born this way, but Dexter doesn't know that. He's been conditioned to write himself off as a monster, born with the darkness. I found this quite emotional because so much of the entire show hangs on this. Harry here had a chance to come clean, be honest. Although I think we knew he wouldn't. And instead, he just reinforces the lie that he's always perpetuated, that, yes, Dexter was born this way. Dexter's there thanking Harry for helping him, guiding him, showing him the way, and I'm thinking, no, this is so tragic. Harry says he's proud of him, which is reassuring for Dexter. Validation, he wants to make him proud. This was a really strong scene, great work by Gibson and Slater here, and wonderfully written. Back at Miami Metro, Harry and Batista talk about Spencer and how they all missed it. Such a big thing like this in their house. You have to think of season 2 with Dokes and how no one ever mentioned something like this happening before, one of their own turning killer. We have to overlook it though. When making season 2, how could the writers have ever dreamed that one day there'd be a prequel series? We have to let it go, guys. But I know it will be something that bugs people, and I'm sure it will come up in the feedback. And we have to acknowledge it, but we have to let it go. Batista asks about the visit to Tampa and the NHI case. Harry says he doesn't think it's a serial killer. Obviously wants to brush this whole thing under the carpet. He wants to make sure Brian isn't investigated and wants to steer the investigation away from the suggestion that the murders are linked. He's got to know that this path, though, will lead to others dying. But LaGuerta overhears this conversation and she does not look impressed. She looks bemused. This is unresolved and will no doubt come back in season 2, if it happens. The episode concludes with Dexter, I say concludes, it's not the last scene of course, but it's winding down, with Dexter being offered a permanent position in forensics. I loved his little chair spin and subtle wink to camera, breaking the fourth wall, but that's not all. Bit more before the credits. We see Bobby getting released from hospital. I love Dexter's voiceover here about understanding why he does what he does, that some people deserve to live. This is an interesting statement because we've long said Dexter only kills because he needs to, and any positive benefit to society is incidental and a happy byproduct. I still don't think Dexter's being, what's the word? Altruistic? Is that the right word? Altruistic, doing what he does. We know he's an unreliable narrator, but in that moment he's recognising that some people are simply good and deserve to go on. They don't deserve to die. By targeting killers, Dexter's helping ensure that innocent people are protected, but I don't buy that has any bearing on his drive to kill. He'd still need to do it. It's the code that guides him this way. We close out the season at a restaurant. The Morgans enjoying a meal together, celebrating Dexter's promotion, but also Deb reveals her police application before Harry joins her for a wonderful celebratory dance. It's a lovely moment for them. Harry kind of passes the torch to Dexter. It's your code now, he says. He sees hope for Dexter that by saving Nikki, he showed that he can channel his urges for good. This good he refers to is subjective, of course. We know this as long-term viewers. The good, like I just said, is the happy byproduct. But his urges will continue. It's the code that helps ensure that good comes from it. And Brian watches on from the outside, looking in, like he's done for so long, it seems. It sets up further exploration in a season 2, if we ever get one. I keep saying that. But if we don't, we might presume Brian respects what Harry said and keeps away for years, perhaps just observing from a distance, waiting for the right moment to try and introduce himself again. And that's Original Sin. That's the finale. We've got some things set up nicely should they get a second season, but if not, I think this is quite a good place to leave it. We've still got the big one of Harry's death that I think we're all pretty united in thinking is going to be at the hands of Brian. That's got to be the biggest thing that we've not seen in this series, and it makes me pretty sure we'll get a second season maybe next year. We also didn't get a present-day bookend here. We had a brief flash, didn't we, of present-day severely wounded Dexter right at the start, and many of us expected another at the end of the finale, but no. Our theory that this series was Dexter maybe telling his story to someone while handcuffed to a hospital bed, it didn't pan out, did it? But that's okay. I think that opening scene tees up resurrection for us. So, as a finale, I think this did its job. And as a series, it's exceeded its remit, re-establishing this character and making him extremely sympathetic when many of us had come to see him as a villain at the end of New Blood, myself included. This is a reminder of who he used to be. In fact, the whole rewatch with my son of the first couple of seasons was jarring. How likeable he could be. I was thinking forward to New Blood and thinking, how do we get there? Of course, we know how we got there. It's a long journey, but we're not here to talk about the original series. So before I digress any further, I'll close this out. I'll be collating all your feedback, your emails, voicemails, messages on the socials. You can follow me on Twitter at Dissect Dexter or Blue Sky, Dissecting Dexter, and Facebook, facebook.com/Dexter Dissecting Dexter. I'll go through all your comments on a special finale feedback episode next week. So again, I love this series. I've had an absolute blast with it, and the finale did just what it needed to, wrapping up the main storylines while teasing us enough to want more from another season. I will be sharing more thoughts on this and the series as we go through your feedback next time, and there's still time to send anything in. You know the address, dissectingdexter@gmail.com. I will bail out now and say thank you for listening. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters, and we will dissect some more Dexter together very soon. Until next time, take care. Bye for now.